Vilnius, 2020, a high-flying executive, Marija, chooses the worst possible moment to inform her husband that she wants a divorce, just a day after the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Suddenly, the couple must navigate the process of separation as it collides with a refugee and a midlife crisis. Boy, does it ever. How to Divorce During the War. Wonderful film. We're joined today by the director and writer, Andrius Blaževičius. And before we get too far into our conversation, I want to let people know how they can see the film, which will be opening in New York on the 21st of August, as well as Los Angeles on August 28th at the Laemmle Royal, one of the great theater chains in the history of mankind. And again, How to Divorce During the War. And also let you know that this is Lithuania's submission for this coming year's Academy Award consideration for Best International Feature Film. So congratulations on all counts. And thank you for being here. This is just a terrific film. I'm so glad we're having an opportunity to talk about this. Let's talk a little bit about the inspiration for the film, because it feels very familiar. Where you were from, what part of the world you're from, there's so much of the story that is about the human condition and our restlessness, if you will, with our lives. Tell me a little bit about the inspiration.
Yeah, well, the inspiration came from real life. It was the war, which started in Ukraine because Lithuania, we were occupied for 50 years by Russia. We were part of the Soviet Union. There was no such a country as Lithuania for 50 years. So, when Russia started this war, for us, it was really, really scary. It was shock. I remember myself 4 days I wasn't able to, get out of the bed. I was just laying in bed, doom scrolling, searching for every news. Because if you remember, in the very beginning of the war, there was this belief that, Ukraine will fall in 3 days, that Russia will occupy it like in 3 days, and that's it. But the war is still happening after 4.5 years. And again, other thing was divorce topic, because myself, I went through a few separations in my life, and there are many people around me divorcing, and I was listening to some podcasts or reading that there are not enough films about divorce, because there is so much divorce in our lives around us, but not that many films. When the war started, and then this divorce theme, it somehow beautifully merged into each other, because COVID before the war, and then the war, it started those divisions in society. Like people, some people were supporting Russia and Lithuania. Thanks God that it's just like a really small minority of those people. Majority were supporting Ukraine, but COVID. Before also started this divisions, and like some people believe in vaccines, some people don't want to go to this quarantine. I don't know if it's like the right English word, like for this shutting down everything. And these two topics somehow they are beautifully just somehow merged, and I really found it important to say the stories. And I also believe that there will be people around the world who will connect to that, because when you're not in the war and you're like watching it from the distance, you have this hopelessness. You want to do something, you want to help, you want to save the world, but it's impossible. And somehow I thought that people will relate to that.
Yeah, and I don't want to make this a sweeping statement about the state of the world, but increasingly, for a lot of factors, it feels like we're in kind of a wartime mentality around the world, whether or not it be migration, the movement of people around the world, whether it be climate, whether it be a real war that's happening on our borders or close enough, as in the case of Lithuania. Yeah, it does feel like we're increasingly on this fight or flight sort of mentality. And so to juxtapose that with quote unquote normal human behavior of being at the end of a relationship with a family and all of the things that go on, I just thought you did a beautiful job of balancing those existential challenges with I'll call it the mundane, the day-to-day things in this film. So congratulations on your ability to kind of navigate that
Yeah,
realm.
thank you. Well, it was very, important for me, because I really wanted to tell, for me, films which are just talking about existential life or like existential themes, very often I find them like not enough for me.
Yeah.
I really want, because we live in such a interesting in a scary way world now, that I really wanted to somehow to capture this moment, and but at the same time, if you will make just a political film, then again, I don't find it interesting. But to combine those two things, existential and this political subjects, are was always my goal. Like from my first film, I was trying to do that. In this case, observing the real life, what was happening in Lithuania when the war started, I saw that it was impacting lives, like really impacting lives. It wasn't like the war is happening in a parallel universe, but it was like in a film. People were taking part in protests. People, they had to do something with their, work, because like company can have a ties in Russia. Some people have a relatives in Russia. You could feel it everywhere. This
Yeah.
war was everywhere. Then the refugees came. There's so many of them. Then Russians who were against Putin, they also came to Lithuania, and it was really impacting our lives. So that to combine those two topics, in this case it wasn't hard because it was happening in real life,
Yeah.
and you could see that everywhere.
A couple of things, and I'm not an expert by any stretch of the imagination on Lithuania and the other Baltic states, but I do know that there's a significant percentage of people in all of those different countries that are Russian. They are, and they speak Russian. And I don't know if I don't know what the official language of Lithuania is, but it's not Russian, is it? I mean, it's its own language.
No, no,
But
no. We have our language, and this is actually it's true about those percentages about like Russian minorities, but the thing is about Lithuania is that it's not that much. I think that still there are many people who believe that there are like many
mm,
Russians here,
mm.
but it's about 5%
Oh,
of
okay.
Russians.
Yeah.
So but it's much more in Latvia and Estonia. It's true. There is like 20-30%, something like this,
Mm.
of Russians. So because in Lithuania we have Polish, like seven, I think, percent of Polish. Myself, I'm half Polish actually, so it's we have Polish and Russian minorities basically, and also Belarus, people from Belarus, Belarusians. And so Belarusians, they also speak Russian. But the thing is that because we were occupied for many
Yeah.
years,
Yeah.
there are still many people who understand language and who speak Russian language. But like people who are younger than 40 years old, some of them, understand, but younger than 30, almost nobody speaks Russian.
Yeah.
We speak English, we understand English, and much better now than Russian, and but still, I see that people think that we are, that we are almost Russians, but we are not actually, you
Okay.
know.
Yeah. And what you said earlier about the perception of the initial invasion of Ukraine was that it would collapse. And without getting into all the politics, but there was a lot of chatter about where next. There was sort of almost immediately, where are they going next? And obviously that would have come into the conversation. But I do want to talk about your characters, Vytas, and I want to make sure Deville,
Dovile,
Devila,
Dovile,
Davila,
yeah.
the daughter, their day-to-day life. And she's a successful executive at a internet content provider kind of company. She's doing very well. And Vitas is struggling. He's a filmmaker who, I don't know if there's any autobiographical information in this, but sort of struggling and trying to put together a script, basically wants to do what he wants to do, but in the meantime, taking care of the domestic side of their relationship. Their young, precocious, very intelligent daughter is a part of this mix, and she understands a lot more than she may appear to at first. So, and especially there's one particular scene where that plays out very well in the film. It's a family. It's family that struggles and they have their good times and such. But we catch them at a time when it feels like this pale hangs over their family. Like they're in kind of a stasis. They're inert in some ways. Is that a fair way to describe the internal dynamics of the family? Am I doing?
Of course, yeah, yeah, yeah. It's they are really in this. phase of their life. It's like midlife crisis, probably it's the right word to say, because Maria, the wife, she's younger than Vytas, and again, she's successful, and actually, this there is this theme in a film about this dynamic between changing role of gender, like male, female, and she's the main supporter, because Lithuania still has this too much of patriarchalic tradition but it's again in younger generation, it's very different, of course, but but still for him, it's a struggle in a way, but that he's not cool anymore, and it was very important, that again, it's because when we had this midlife crisis and family crisis, and again, it somehow connects to this crisis I think we are now in the world, and because as I mentioned in the beginning, we had the COVID, which was a huge crisis. Now the war's happening. Then we have everything what's happening in the United States, because it's still what happens in the United States. It affects the whole world basically, and yeah, so this was very, it was something I'm very interested in, because myself, I'm also now 41 years old, so the same age as the director in the film, the character in the film, and there were some autobiographical things about the struggling to write. And again, I really had this one common thing with that character is that I really like to spend time in my home, you know. It was very important, and I think it's somehow again it serves story very well, and again, audience can connect to those characters
I
because of that.
absolutely agree with everything you just said because it's that's what the film is. A lot of it is about this, and one of the things is it because of the way it's shot, it's very much in kind of in the shadows. It's a sort of a darker palette of there's not a lot of color, bright color in the film, at least in the apartment. Outside of the apartment, it's a little different in terms of how it looks. So there's that contrast. I just felt like these people just don't know what to do next. And then you throw in the Russian invasion, and then suddenly a lot of things that may have been put on the back burner, are now suddenly very important. Maria is definitely the dynamic character in the film. She's the one who starts all of this in motion. And I love the
Yes.
scene in the car. I just love how it plays out and how, again, there's just so many, in addition to the story, the performances throughout the film are tonally just very much spot on. And that's another thing about the film that I really appreciated. There's humor in the film. It's understated, but there's a lot of appropriate, there's nothing playing to the back row kind of humor in this film, but it's certainly there. And to me, the scene in the car is a combination of serious issues to be discussed, but also there is a touch of humor in his reaction and other things that happen. So, is that, I mean, I think it's a pivotal scene in the film. And one other last thing, it's the impulsivity of Maria and to
Yes.
some degree of all the characters, but she's the one who sets things in motion with this sweeping decision. I'd love to talk about her and her character.
This humor thing is really, again, I thought that it's important to put it in there, because I didn't want to make it totally dark. As you noticed, this film has it's really, like, especially apartment, it's really lacks colors, it's really dark, and but again, it came from the real life, to be honest, because the whole atmosphere was very bleak, dark, in because we were waiting that the Russia will do something.
Yeah.
Coming to the real life, in Lithuania, February and March are the most, like, it's very dark and humid months. So there are almost no sunlight, and so it was very easy decision to make this film look like this, because it's the atmosphere was dark, and in reality the weather is like this. Maria's character, I totally agree with you that she's very impulsive, and that she at the same time, I think that she really thought about that. She thought that she wants to divorce Vytas. But again, I think that she never thought that through. She wasn't thinking enough about what she will do with her lover.
Yeah.
How she will tell it to Dovile that she has a lover. Because she's still hiding. Plus, it's a working, like a work romance, which is again, it's not elaborated in the film, but probably company won't be happy that two, important executive and important producer having a romance, in the company. So you can see that she's really not thinking enough, and she goes with this flow, and because I really believe that that character she was she had to control so many things in her life, in the workplace, especially that when she goes to this feelings love, then she needs to let it go, and this is the outcome in her case.
Well, there's some, and by the way, as the film progresses, because she takes in refugees into the home, again, not quite thinking it all the way through. Then there's a kind of a ruthlessness to her character, especially as she's trying to essentially pull her life back together in some version of it. There's all of a sudden she's frenetically doing all of the things that she's sort of undoing a lot of the things that she had initially done. She's a great character. And so is Vytas, his character. I like him. There's a lot of life in a
Yeah,
good way
thank
in
you.
the film. Yeah, they're just no matter where you're from, no matter what country, no matter who's invaded who in your life, certainly this creates this kind of visceral sense in the film. But there's almost a Kramer versus Kramer feel to this film. I know that's a stretch, but it just there's a lot of, again, I kept coming back to, it feels like these characters would be at home in an American film, and just in the way that they're interacting with one another. And I'm familiar in my own, cinematic history of people who behave this way, and then suddenly, or not suddenly, but anyway, I'm not going to say any more about the progression of the story. But there's humor. I love the Russophile parents
Yeah,
in the
yeah.
film. They're wonderful. They're terrific. Yeah, the film really, truly. By the way, the film is called "How to Divorce During the War," and once again, I want to remind you that, not you, but I want to remind our audience that it was Lithuania's entry into Best International Feature, and and also it is going to be opening in New York on August 21st. That is at the IFC Theater, and opening here in Los Angeles at the Laemmle Royal on August 28th, with a national rollout to follow. Congratulations on all the acclaim the film has received, as well as I do want to talk in just the minute or two we have left about your cast, Maria, Vytas, and Davila, just to talk a little bit about their performances and mentioning them by name, which I won't even try to do. Please.
Yeah, well, yeah, Maria, it's actress Zygimante Elena Jakstaite. I worked with her before in my previous film, Runner. She was the lead there. Actually, it was her Runner was her first role, and she was immediately the leading in that film. And I think she made a great job. And yeah, I think she's one of the best actress actually in Lithuania. And the same I can say about Marius Repsys, who plays Vytas. With him, I work because we are the same age, and we were in our academy in Lithuania. We, entered in the same year, so I started to work with him when I was in second year in my film school, and he was second year in acting. He was in all my films. So when I was writing the script, so I was imagining them. Dovile, actress Amelia Domaitytė, I casted her. Thanks God, the casting wasn't that big because I did the casting myself of all actors, and I casted maybe 50 kids, and that's it. I found her quite fast, and I was just very lucky about it because she was just perfect, and she also had this facial features which are close to Marius Repsys, who plays her father, so you could believe that she's his daughter, and to work with her was really good. And she I remember during the casting she came to read, because I was doing this classical casting. I gave the kids a scene and I asked them to read the scene, which is really tricky when you're casting 9-year-old or 10-year-old person, and she was reading better than grown-ups. And so it was the first sign that she's really intelligent, and then when we had to do all those crazy tough scenes, and she did everything. And I was just really lucky to work with those amazing actors. And I really wish them somehow to be noticed. I know I really want them to go abroad, from Lithuania to act in, I don't know, foreign language films, because they're really, really good. Really
Yeah.
good.
I thought so too. Thought they were great. Well, I want to thank you for your time here today. How to Divorce During the War. Terrific work, director and writer, and you mentioned casting director in the film, uh, Andrius Blaževičius. Thank you for your time and your
Thank you so
pleasure.
much, really.
Congratulations on the film. I'm looking forward to more from you, and I hope hopefully sometime down the road you'll come back. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It
You're
was
very
great.
welcome.